It was a dark and stormy night in October. I was home alone, just watching TV and trying to relax after a long day at work. The wind was howling something fierce outside, practically shaking the old farmhouse. Thunder boomed loudly, making me jump. Storms never really bothered me before, but there was something about this one that put me on edge. I got up to make sure all the doors and windows were locked up tight. As I was checking the sliding glass door in the kitchen, lightning flashed brightly, momentarily turning night into day. That's when I saw it. There was something in my backyard. It was only for a split second, but the image burned into my mind. A dark figure, vaguely human-shaped, stood completely still among the whipping trees and shrubs. It was like a shadow come to life. I blinked hard, wondering if it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. But no, there was definitely someone, or something, out there. My heart started racing. What should I do? Call the police? I didn't even know what I saw, really. It could have just been a trick of the light. Still, I couldn't shake the ominous feeling creeping up my spine. I turned off the lights in the kitchen so I could see better out into the dark backyard. Pressing my face against the cold glass, I scanned the area thoroughly. At first, I didn't see anything strange, but then lightning illuminated the yard again and I saw it. That same dark figure standing in the same exact spot. It was closer to the house now. Fear gripped me. This wasn't my imagination. Someone was out there watching my house, waiting. A million terrifying possibilities raced through my mind. Should I grab a weapon to defend myself, flee out the front door, or barricade myself in a room and call 911? My gut was screaming at me to run, to get away from whoever or whatever lurked in my backyard. The thunderstorm raged on outside. I moved from window to window, carefully checking each one while avoiding standing directly in front of them. The dark figure stayed eerily still in the same position every time the lightning flashed. Though I never saw it move, it seemed to slowly creep closer and closer to the house with each brilliant burst of light. My fear quickly spiraled into full-blown panic. I fumbled for my cell phone, my hands shaking. As I was about to dial the police, a deafening crack of thunder exploded through the air. Suddenly, all the power in the house cut out, plunging me into darkness. I gasped, the phone dropping from my hands and clattering across the hardwood floor. Blindly, I dropped to my knees and felt around for my phone. I had to call for help. This was no normal storm. Something evil had come to my home. I could feel it. After what seemed like an eternity, my fingers finally closed around the phone. I quickly punched in 911 as I continued crouching on the floor. Bringing the phone to my ear, I was greeted only by an ominous silence. No ringing, no dispatcher. In my growing panic, I had forgotten the landlines would be useless with the power out. And my cell phone had almost no signal thanks to the heavy storm interference. I was completely alone. I sat there huddled in darkness, my eyes straining against the blackness. I kept imagining I could see the shadowy figure moving outside the windows, creeping steadily toward a door or window to get inside. Terror gripped me in its icy talons. I knew I needed to move, to get to safety, but I was paralyzed by fear. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed through the windows, followed immediately by a booming crack of thunder. For a split second, everything was illuminated in a ghostly white glow. That's when I saw it, the dark figure, right outside the window, face pressed against the glass, staring right at me. I screamed at the top of my lungs. Adrenaline flooded my body, freeing me from paralysis. I jumped up and sprinted through the house. My only thought was getting as far away as possible from those menacing eyes that seemed to pierce my very soul. I tore open a closet door and threw myself inside, slamming it closed behind me. Crouched down with my back against the wall, I buried my face in my knees and trembled uncontrollably. The storm raged louder than ever outside. Thunder shook the walls again and again. I couldn't stop replaying that face in the window over and over in my mind. That pale, hairless skin, those dark, sunken eyes gazing deeply into mine. It couldn't have been human. Just thinking about it made my stomach churn. Huddling there pathetically in the closet, I knew I needed to pull myself together and make a plan. I needed to figure out how to defend myself against whatever that thing was outside. My mind raced as I tried to remember if there were any other weapons in the house besides some kitchen knives that I could try to grab. Maybe my car keys to slash with. I was also trying to remember how many exits there were from this closet room. Was there another door that led outside or to other rooms? My racing thoughts were interrupted by the unmistakable sound of slow, heavy footsteps creeping down the hallway. My whole body tensed. It was inside. Sharp fear twisted my guts. I covered my mouth tightly with my hand to stifle my panicked breathing. It sounded like each heavy footstep reverberated through the floor as the thing drew nearer. Suddenly, the footsteps halted right outside the closet door. My eyes squeezed shut, and I prayed desperately for it not to notice me huddled there in the darkness. After what felt like an eternity suspended in gut-wrenching terror, I heard the heavy footsteps slowly start moving again, walking on down the hallway. I waited several agonizing minutes before cautiously cracking open the closet door. Peering around fearfully, I saw only an empty hallway. The footsteps had gone in the direction of the bedrooms rather than toward me, at least for now. Knowing it was my chance, I bolted from the closet and made a beeline for the kitchen at the other end of the house. My trembling hands fumbled to grab the largest knife from the knife block. Gripping the blade tightly in front of me, I continued creeping toward the back door, constantly glancing behind me. My only thought was to take this one opportunity to escape outside, get in my car, and get the hell away from here as fast as the old station wagon could carry me. I made it to the back door unseen, though I could still hear those heavy footsteps somewhere in the house, methodically walking from room to room. I slowly turned the knob, praying the door wouldn't creak. I pushed it open just enough to slip outside into the dark, stormy night. The wind and rain immediately assaulted me as I sprinted for where I parked my car. No. This couldn't be happening. I reached the driver's side door and frantically pulled on the handle, but of course, it was locked tight. The wind whipped my hair wildly as I looked around in desperation. Should I break a window and try to hotwire the car? Too late. Thunder boomed deafeningly overhead, and I could sense that thing from the house now standing behind me, watching my futile efforts to escape. Slowly, I turned around, knife trembling in my hand. Lightning illuminated its grotesque face for an instant as it took a lurching step toward me. I backed against the car door, slashing my weapon blindly through the air. "Stay back," I warned, trying to sound intimidating despite my voice quaking with fear. It kept shambling toward me, undeterred. Thunder crashed again, closer and closer it came. I screamed and sank down to the ground, cowering helplessly, knowing there was no escape from this night. It was Halloween night, and I was so excited to go trick-or-treating around my neighborhood. I got dressed up in my favorite ninja costume, complete with a plastic sword and mask. My best friend Jenny was joining me, and she looked awesome dressed as a zombie with fake blood and torn clothes. We grabbed our trick-or-treat bags and headed out, ready for a night of candy and fun. The streets were filled with kids running around in costumes. Skeletons, princesses, superheroes, you name it. Everyone was out showing off their costumes. Jenny and I went up and down the streets shouting "trick or treat" at each house. People happily dropped candy in our bags, oohing and eyeing over our costumes. After about an hour, our bags were getting pretty heavy. "Let's hit a few more houses and then call it a night," I said. Jenny agreed, hefting her bulging bag over her shoulder. We walked up to a house I didn't recognize. It was dark, with overgrown bushes and trees blocking most of the windows. "I don't know about this one," Jenny said nervously. But I marched right up to the door. No rotten old house was going to scare me off from more candy. I rang the doorbell and waited. After a few seconds, the door creaked open. An elderly woman with wild gray hair and pale skin stood there, smiling faintly. "Trick or treat," I said uncertainly. Wordlessly, she held out a plastic pumpkin pail filled with candy bags made of black construction paper. I took one and stepped aside so Jenny could take one too. Thanks," I said. The woman just kept smiling. She didn't say a word. Jenny and I turned and walked away quickly, eager to put some distance between us and that creepy house. "Let's see what she gave us," Jenny said once we were a few houses down. She opened her black candy bag and pulled out a sticky note. "What's this?" she muttered. She read the note and her eyes went wide. It says, "You look so pretty in that costume, but you'd look even prettier if I skinned you alive." Jenny screamed and dropped the note. "Don't read yours," she yelled, but it was too late. I had already opened the bag and unfolded the sticky note inside. It read, "I've got my eye on you. Maybe I'll pluck those eyes out from my collection." I shrieked and threw the note on the ground. "What kind of sick joke is this?" I said, my heart pounding. Jenny was shaking, tears filling her eyes. I just want to go home, she whimpered. I nodded, feeling sick to my stomach. We turned to leave. Then I remembered the last item at the bottom of my black candy bag. Hesitantly, I reached in and pulled it out. It was an old Polaroid picture of a young girl lying in leaves, her eyes glazed over, blood pooling around her. Scrawled on the bottom were the words, "You're next." Jenny let out a wail when she saw the photo. We both started running, bags dropping and spilling candy as our feet pounded the pavement. We didn't stop until we were safe inside my house with the door locked. I tried to tell my mom what happened, but she just rolled her eyes and said we were letting our imaginations run wild after too much candy. Jenny refused to leave and slept over that night. We barricaded my bedroom door with furniture and barely slept a wink, jumping at every creak and rustle. In the morning, everything seemed less scary. It must have just been some creep trying to prank kids. We decided to walk back to get the candy we had dropped. The street looked different in the daylight. Cheerful pumpkins, still decorated porches, and fallen leaves blew down the sidewalk. When we got close to the house from last night, I froze. Jenny grabbed my arm with a death grip. The house was totally abandoned, with a faded for sale sign out front. It looked like it had been empty for months. But just last night, there had been someone living there, hadn't there? We stood staring at the house, unable to move. Then the breeze picked up, blowing an old Polaroid across the sidewalk until it landed at my feet. Hands shaking, I picked it up and turned it over. It was a photo of me and Jenny from last night walking away from the house, and this time the message on the bottom reads, "I always find my prey." It was supposed to be just another road trip, a chance to get away from the daily grind and see some new scenery. I had mapped out my route through some small towns along the way, planning to stop and stretch my legs every few hours. Little did I know then that this trip would become the most terrifying experience of my life. The morning started out bright and sunny as I loaded up my car. I felt excited to hit the open road. My first stop was a tiny town called Willow Creek, about 3 hours into the drive. I arrived around lunchtime, ready for a bite to eat. The main street was quaint, lined with mom-and-pop shops and restaurants. Only a few people were out and about. I spotted a diner and pulled into the parking lot. A little bell jingled above the door as I walked in. The inside was decorated in classic 50s style, with black and white checkered flooring and red leather booths. A curly-haired waitress named Stacy greeted me with a friendly smile. "Sit anywhere you like, hun," she said, handing me a menu. I chose a table by the window and peered outside while waiting for Stacy to return. Something seemed off about the people passing by. Their movements appeared slightly jerky and unnatural, reminding me of animatronics at an amusement park. I shook my head, figuring it was just my imagination after the long drive. Stacy came by and I ordered a burger and fries. As I ate, I continued peering out the window. The more I watched, the more convinced I became that something wasn't right about the townspeople. Their expressions were frozen, like plastic masks. Their bodies were stiff, their gaits more like robots than humans. My appetite vanished. I left some cash on the table and hurried outside, my pulse quickening. The street was empty now except for one figure slowly approaching. It was an elderly man walking a dog on a leash. Only upon closer inspection I realized the leash was attached to nothing. The dog didn't exist. The man stopped a few feet away, gazing at me with clouded eyes. His wrinkled face was motionless, not even a blink. Fear gripped me as I understood the horrible truth. This wasn't a real person at all. It was some kind of fake human, an imposter. I backed away slowly to my car, my eyes darting around for more imposters. The streets remained still and quiet. I got into my car, locked the doors, and peeled out of there as fast as I could. My heart pounded as I sped down the road, putting distance between me and that bizarre town. After several miles, I pulled over to collect myself. I had no idea what I had witnessed back there, but everything in my gut told me it was wrong. Those things, whatever they were, pretended to be human, but were most certainly not. As I caught my breath, I checked my map. There was another small town called Carter's Creek coming up in about 20 minutes. I debated what to do. Part of me wanted to turn around and go home, but I had to know if Willow Creek was an isolated incident or if something even more sinister was going on. I steeled my nerves and continued forward. The outskirts of Carter's Creek looked perfectly normal at first glance. There were rows of well-kept homes with trees in the yards and flowers in the gardens. I slowed down as I reached the main street, carefully observing the people. Once again, their movements seemed ever so slightly off in a disquieting way. One man walked a dog on a leash, but the leash hung slack as if not attached to anything. A group of children played in a front yard, but their laughter sounded distorted and warped. Apprehension flooded my body, making my hands shake. This wasn't normal. These weren't regular small towns full of regular people. They were fake towns full of fake things pretending to be human. I didn't linger this time. As soon as I confirmed my suspicions, I hit the gas to get out of there. But as I neared the edge of town, flashing lights appeared in my rearview mirror. A police car was tailing me with sirens blaring. My throat tightened. Could I be sure the cop was even real? I pulled over with dread, watching the policeman approach in my side mirror. He tapped on my window and I reluctantly lowered it. Up close, his face looked waxy and expressionless. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "License and registration," he responded in a flat, robotic tone. My fears were confirmed. This was no real cop, just another imposter. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to get away. When I hesitated, the cop's fake face seemed to twitch with impatience. "Your license, sir, now." I paused, about to hit the gas pedal and make a run for it. But before I could react, the cop's hand shot through the open window with lightning speed and gripped my neck in an iron hold. No human could move that fast. His fingers squeezed tighter, cutting off my breath. I gasped and choked, trying to pry away the steely grip. My efforts were useless. As my vision darkened, I noticed more imposters gathering around the car. Their fake faces stared at me with dead eyes. My terrified mind wondered if these things had been created specifically to trap unwary travelers. I realized then that I wouldn't be leaving this town alive. With a final burst of strength, I slammed my foot on the accelerator while cranking the wheel all the way to the left. The cop's grip loosened enough for me to break free as the car swerved up onto the sidewalk. It plowed through the rows of fake citizens before crashing into a building across the street. The impact jarred my bones and smashed my head against the steering wheel. For a moment, everything went black. Then I was dimly aware of drops of blood trickling down my forehead. The acrid smell of smoke filled my nostrils. With great effort, I pushed open the crumpled car door and crawled outside. All around me, the imposters converged, their faces distorted in rage. I staggered to my feet and ran, weaving drunkenly around them. My progress was slow and stumbling, but I managed to escape the mob. I fled blindly, turning down empty streets and alleys with no idea where I was going. I just knew I had to get out of this nightmare town. I could hear the steady pursuit of footsteps behind me. How long could I evade them in my condition? I took another corner and found myself entering a park. In the center stood a dense copse of trees. If I could make it there, maybe I could hide. I pushed my aching body faster, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. Just a little farther now. The footfalls grew louder behind me, mixed with garbled shouts. I didn't dare look back. At last, I reached the cluster of trees and ducked into their concealing branches. I crouched down, shuddering with fear and exhaustion. Peering between the leaves, I watched the imposters scour the park. Their jerky movements and twisted faces left no doubt. Whatever these monsters were, they weren't human. Eventually, they dispersed to search elsewhere. But I knew they'd never stop hunting for me now. I was a risk, someone who knew the truth about their evil charade. As I huddled there with blood dripping into my eyes, I understood I could never leave this place alive. By stumbling onto their secrets, I had sealed my own fate. There would be no escaping the town of mimics masquerading as people. It all started a few weeks ago when my friend Tom told me about this new indie game he had found online. He said it was a cute, retro-style platformer called Bitty Bunny Bounce. The graphics looked like something straight out of a 90s kids cartoon. Bright colors, simple designs, and an adorable bunny as the main character. Tom said he had been playing it non-stop and urged me to try it out. I wasn't expecting much when I downloaded Bitty Bunny Bounce on my laptop that night. Platform games were never really my thing, but I had to admit, the game was strangely addicting right from the start. The upbeat music, the smooth controls, and the way collecting carrots and hopping on enemies felt satisfyingly rewarding. I found myself wanting to get further and further into the colorful world to see what surprises lay ahead. After a few days of playing, I noticed the game was changing. At first it was subtle, like the color palette becoming a bit more muted and dark. The music shifted to a more unsettling minor key. I figured it was just the levels getting progressively harder. But then I reached a level where the sky background turned to a nighttime scene. The bunny's cute tuft of hair on its head was now stringy and matted. Its eyes lost their cheerful sparkle, instead looking hollow and lifeless. The carrots it collected were now gnarled and rotten. I felt unnerved playing but pressed on, assuming the game was just trying to challenge me with scarier graphics. However, soon, the troubling changes felt more insidious. The bunny's jumps became more violent, with disturbing crunching sounds when it landed on enemies. Instead of bouncing cheerily, it now twitched and convulsed. Dark red stains appeared under enemies when they were stomped on. I tried to ignore the ugly visuals, focusing on the gameplay. But the once peppy music warped into something bone-chilling. Shrill, discordant notes that made my heart race anxiously. At a certain point, I decided I had had enough. The game was upsetting me too much. I forced quit the app, but that's when things got truly terrifying. My computer screen glitched, flashing rapidly between images of the bunny with hyper-realistic bloodshot eyes. The visual distortions were accompanied by a loud, garbled sound like a broken TV blaring in my ears. I panicked, pressing keys frantically to no avail. The computer would not shut off no matter what I did. Then everything went black for a moment. When the screen came back, it showed the game menu as if nothing had happened. Hesitantly, I tried clicking New Game, thinking it would reset everything, but as soon as I spawned into the level, I gasped in shock. Gone were the charming retro graphics and cute bunny. It was now a photorealistic scene of a dead forest at night. The silence was heavy and ominous. At the bottom of the screen, in a small clearing between bare trees, stood a realistic blood-soaked bunny. Its fur was matted into spikes. One lifeless, dilated eye stared directly out at me, unblinking. The other eye was a gouged-out mess. I stood up, heart pounding, and stepped away from the computer, too petrified to touch it. That's when the speakers emitted a deafening screech that pierced my whole body with dread. The bloody bunny somehow turned its head to follow me, despite just being a 3D model on screen. Then it started to move. It twitched and staggered towards me, leaving trails of blood behind it. The forest scenery blurred and stretched as the bunny moved unnaturally out of frame. It was slowly trying to crawl out of the computer. The excruciating metallic shriek got louder. I ran out and grabbed a hammer from the garage, smashing the laptop repeatedly until it was an unrecognizable pile of plastic and silicon. The noise finally stopped as the thing that used to be my computer went silent. No trace of the game was left. Since then, I've been afraid to use any technology. I disposed of everything, even my phone. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. That somewhere on a static-filled screen or pixelated surface, the bloody-eyed bunny is still trying to get out. I see flickers sometimes, of color, movement, that make my skin crawl. I don't know how, but something evil was born out of that game. And it latched onto me. I don't think I'll ever be free of it. Wherever I look, I imagine its mangled face staring back.